Squid Gamers, rise up!
I'm Squid Game, I'm Squid Game, I'm Squid Game, Squid Game, Squid Game.
At the end of the day, Squid happens, and it
Squid
sure
happens.
did, and it sure has. This is the biggest thing in pop
is.
culture right now, and
It is.
I'm so glad that I watched it. I watched it before everyone else was watching it. Then I told you guys to watch it.
Yep.
And now we've all seen the Squid Game.
The Squid Game.
Fucking Squid Game. I gotta say, it is nice the few times these days, even in this world of like streaming and very fractured entertainment, that it feels like an actual like water cooler show to a degree comes back.
Yeah.
Admittedly, that's partly because Meg and I only binged the last few episodes and the rest we kind of spread over a few days. But like, you can pretty reasonably expect to be able to discuss this with most people.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Like, I've been, like, everywhere I've gone, like, you know, I've gone to some, like, Halloween parties already. I've gone to, like, you know, different places around, and people are just talking about Squid Game, and you know what? They're in different stages of having watched all of it. It's not just, oh, did you binge the latest season of BoJack Horseman? Have you seen all 12 episodes? If you didn't, don't talk to me about it. Like, this is a legitimate, like, it feels a little bit like how Invincible did. Although that one, it was kind of enforced by its week-by-week thing. This, I think it's because of the episode length and that it's actually being spread by word of mouth. And, like, for a lot of Americans, like, you know, people don't usually delve into the foreign media, but this is really taken off, and I think I am more than happy that we now have like another mainstream death game show, because that's a favorite genre of mine.
Yeah. It's a really great genre, and I think as the title and thumbnail probably clued all the audience in, we're going to be kind of discussing, I guess, where Squid Game fits in to this whole like death game world, like the things it like repeats and pays homage to and fits into the formula of, and the places where it elevates it. Because I think we're all in agreement that like as death games go, you know, they're not really executed as flawlessly. Oh god, that's a dangerous fucking word. They're not executed as well generally as something like Squid Game, which has a really like consummate feeling to it.
It's just it's a show that says so much more than like your average death game thing does.
Yes, because so often in these death game shows, the like conflict comes from like, this game is to weed out the weak ones in society. Or it's like, this game is to determine how society like isolates and eliminates people. And it's always comes down to this like vague kind of like social Darwinist thing, but in this case, it's about fucking money, which is real, and the way that actually occurs in real life.
Yeah.
It's about economic anxieties.
It's true.
It's even more like, I remember being like a teenager and thinking like, oh my god, The Hunger Games is so like, you know, that really speaks to the truth of the world with the way that like, it's about how like people will like the rich pit poor people against each other. But like, that's a YA book series. Not to disparage YA books or the writers of those YA books, because like The Hunger Games still has a lot of like important things to say. It is a good like baby's first death game. But Squid Game does that whole like rich people pitting poor people against each other for their own amusement thing so much. You know, in a way that's, like, way less fantastical, and a lot more like, oh my god, you could believe that this would happen in real life.
Bingo.
Yeah, that's a big thing. The fact that, like, the world of Squid Game is pretty much our own. It's just, you know, it's the kind of, like, position that any country is in after kind of a major recession, which, you know, in this post-COVID world, like, you know, the original Squid Game, obviously, the trivia about it, it was first written back in 2009, but back then...
After the GFC.
Yeah, nobody wanted to touch it, because they thought, oh, it's a bit too dark, maybe it won't be realistic, but given that things like the world of Squid Game have happened again and again since, it's finally now in this post-COVID era where we're seeing, like, unprecedented, like, economic unrest and inequality again. The people find like, hey, what was that script that was on our desk 10 years ago? Maybe we should call that guy again.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The fact that the themes are so, like, true to the world we're living in now, especially like the way people are perceiving the world we're living in now. Everything to do with why this blew up. Because like, just as a comparison, there was this Japanese movie that came out called like As the Gods Will, which was like another like kind of elimination style death game where people participated in like different children's games and only those who could figure out the game survive. In that one, in As the Gods Will, it's like aliens decided to do it, and when you lose the game, you supernaturally are killed in like a weird dumb way, like exploding into marbles and stuff. And it comes across as like way more juvenile and way more, at the same time, like way more cynical, because it's like, figure out how to play these games or someday someone will just randomly kill you over nothing for it. In this, there is cynicism, but there's also a sense that like anybody would like fight for this kind of prize money. The stakes and the world that are set up are close enough to our own that it doesn't feel cynical, it just feels real.
Yeah, I think honestly, in that regard, the episode that really made this show is episode 2.
Yeah.
Yes!
Because the genius of episode 2, Hell. Well, before we move on, by the way, this was created by Hwang Dong-hyuk, who both wrote and directed it.
All of the episodes?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, massive credit to that guy. Just thought we'd, name and give credit where it's due. Hwang Dong-hyuk, fucking amazing work, dude. But episode 2, Hell, is where, like, the first time that I think this show, despite playing into a lot of death game conventions, really set itself apart.
Yeah.
Because it took the time to completely eliminate this idea of, like, oh, why are they doing it? Or, like, oh, why don't they try harder to escape? Like, they go out of their way to show the, like, the systemic problems that box all these different people in and make them desperate are the kind of thing where just surviving the game or getting out of the game wouldn't allow them to escape. It's almost like the first episode is almost like a whole movie where they go through the death game and survive, and then they get out. And normally the movie would end there.
Yeah.
But the second episode shows
the aftermath.
Yeah, just because they lived doesn't mean any of the problems that put them there went away. And it's that level of restraint that you'll go like some episodes without even seeing a game.
Yeah.
That I think really shows.
Yes, there's 9 episodes, but I think there's only
6 games.
6 games, yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I think when I was recommending it to you guys, that was like the first thing I said about it, was that like, in contrast to a lot of the other death games, the Squid Game is so voluntary to the point that it feels like a weird, like, it is doing like manufactured consent in the way that like big corporations do it with their products as a narrative device.
It's also kind of like the way that, people will sign themselves up for reality television just to get the money. You're put into like humiliating situations, but you do so with informed consent.
Then the Chuck Wendigs of the world come in and mock you.
Yeah, then Chuck Wendig mocks you because you're a woman that can touch him.
Well, it reminded me a lot of Sorry to Bother You, where like in that universe you can just become a slave. Like you can sign up for like to either be in slavery or get the shit beaten out of you on a game show
called I Got the Shit Kicked Out of Me.
Yeah, like that is more heightened, and a lot of it's done for like kind of dark comedy purposes, but it's not too far off from like the concepts presented in Squid Game, that like if capitalism accelerates to a certain point, you will get these things that like people will just accept because, hey, the point of the system is to make money, and ethics are built around what makes you money and what you're willing to put yourself to, and the thin veneer that it's all voluntary.
Yeah, I think your comment there about like manufacturing consent in particular is really fascinating, because it casts my mind back to Big Joel's recent video about MatPat and how a lot of that is talking about, within the free market, you actually have a lot of choice, and you can vote with your dollars, and you can divest.
No, you can't.
From unethical systems, and it's the Squid Game feels like such a perfect like horror thriller version of the we should improve society somewhat, and yet you participate in society. Curious. I am very intelligent.
Yes.
It's the same thing of like, we shouldn't have to do a Squid Game to survive and, like, not let ourselves and our family fall into destitution.
And yet you chose to do the Squid Game.
Exactly.
See, that's interesting. And that gets into, like, you know, the whole, all these people who, like, you know, either believe that the free market, you can vote with your dollar and it will change, or that you can, like, boycott things and that means anything. Because they vote their way out of the Squid Game and then they go back in, but also, even if they had chosen as a unit, as a group, as a population to democratically decide we're not doing a Squid Game, they would get other people to do the Squid Game because the people in power are going to make sure a Squid Game happens regardless of whether or not you participate.
Yeah. They wanted a Squid Game.
You gotta give them the Squid Game.
They're gonna have to have the Squid Game.
Yeah.
And there's always gonna be people in debt who are gonna want to do the Squid Game.
Yeah, hence why they've been doing it, like, canonically for decades.
Exactly.
According to all of the files that Junho, the police officer, finds when he's looking through. But another thing that Meg and I realized is that, like, leaning into the thematic elements also just improved the plot. Like, not only what we've just discussed there, but, like, another big question with a lot of these desk game things that people ask is, like, you know, how do they get away with this? And it can go to some pretty insane extents, either with, like, you know, Jigsaw and Saw.
Isn't the Danganronpa school just, like, in the city? It's just there. They can just walk to it.
Well, it's... Apparently, I believe the thing with Danganronpa is it turns out that, like, the apocalypse has happened outside.
Oh my god.
Yeah, like the Monokumas, like, literally destroyed most of the world before they, like, focused on this one school.
And in Saw, they choose to just be like, oh no, Jigsaw is just that brilliant. Like, he just planned ahead, and you'll never catch him. He's just that intelligent.
You'll never catch him because he can pick any lock.
But the dark genius of Squid Game is the fact that, like, all of the people who disappear into the Squid Game, because you think, Jesus Christ, they've made almost 500 people just disappear in, like, the same week.
Because they're all people that are in huge amounts of debt.
Who would run away anyway for other reasons.
They would run away, or, like,
Be
their
made to
debtors...
disappear.
Yeah, their debtors would come for them. So it makes... There are other explanations for why these people would go missing. And especially when you have people like Ali and Sabyok, who are undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, who have no institutional power.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, like, there's that whole scene, like, in episode 2. Another genius moment in that is when Gi-hun is explaining the entire situation, like, to the police officers, like, to try and, like, be like, we gotta go shut down this Squid Game. And nobody believes him because, like, you know, the chain of events...
It sounds insane.
The chain of events sounds so insane. So, like, you end up getting the situation that even if people come back from the Squid Game, their story sounds so unbelievable. The very fact that they would be let go at all, and that amount of money would be moved, and that they were playing, like, children's games, it's the perfect chain of events to be like, nah, this is crazy. Even if a bunch of people came out and had that same story, it would just, at most, be like a conspiracy theory or a common delusion, like UFO abductions or, like, Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah, and the only reason that, what was the cop's name?
Junho.
Junho. The only reason that Junho, like, is the one that believes it is because his brother got taken by the Squid Game.
Yeah.
And then became a quisling.
Yeah.
As the front
can
man.
we just talk about how Junho does some of the most, like, you know how there's like escape attempts sometimes in these death game shows? He's doing the opposite. He's like breaking into the death game in the most methodical, like, well thought out, like, ways.
Yeah, he's so smart. The characters in this show are really smart.
I was saying, like, earlier, like, this is, like, what, like, the actual kind of, like, smart armchair people in the audience would always be like, that's what I'd do to get into the Squid Game and to interrupt it. And he's doing all of those things, but he's doing things you wouldn't even think about. Things that he does make you feel smart for knowing why he's doing them, not that you would think of them.
Yeah,
and he perfectly exploits the different loopholes in the system, because they have that, like, devious and clever thing of, because all of the staff remain masked, there's no accountability. Like, no one, even if they had a change of heart, would be able to incriminate anyone. and the second anyone takes their mask off, they're immediately executed.
By one of the other Amoguses.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they do
they're
it
a
like
little
the
bit
Amoguses.
Amogus-y.
It's really funny.
Henry and I keep calling them the Amoguses.
I mean, it's just the fact that as
and
Junho is the
Junho
imposter.
is the imposter
Amog them.
among us. All
Alright,
Everyone clicked
that's enough
off.
of that.
But yeah, like Junho, like really like exploits the vulnerabilities of the system, and he's one of those guys who, like, I gotta say the way that this show balances begins and ends different like subplots
Yes.
is masterful. Because it feels like they all come in at the right time, and it never feels bloated.
As a like great like midpoint moment for Junho, like another milestone, the frontman's killing of the Square operative after the second game, and his acquisition of the Square mask, and like how that disrupts the games, all of that was like one brilliant thing that intersected all the plots perfectly. The people playing the game, the people behind the game, and the people Junho trying to interrupt the game.
But also like the organ trafficking guys.
They were so that's what I like, is that there were third parties in for their like own interest in this, as well as just the Death Game staff and the players.
Everyone's greedy.
Yeah.
This show has such a fascinating like I would say honestly, one of the biggest morals of this show is the altruism of like money is the root of all evil, or the want of money is. Because fundamentally, money is presented as like, yes, money will help you avoid certain kinds of misery.
Yeah.
But at a certain point as well, it doesn't bring happiness either. And a lot of the characters, like, they're sort of like, I think what tends to separate the good and bad characters in this is that, like, the good characters, like Gi-hun and Sebyuk, are people who are, like, that they got into their financial situation through, like, desperation. Like, Gi-hun got laid off, then tried to start a business, it failed, got in deep with sharks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But people like Sang-woo, Sang-woo's like an embezzler and a fraudster.
Yeah.
And like a crook
And he put
is
his
like using his own mother's home as collateral. And then there's people like fucking Doksu who, because he was like egotistical and greedy, tried to like rip off his boss at a casino.
Yeah.
And has like a fucking number on his head now.
Yeah.
It's really incredible how they do separate characters like Sang-woo and Doksu from like Gi-hun, Sebyuk, and Ali, who like are kind of the underclass in society. And it's fascinating too, because obviously throughout the show we see a little bit more of what Sang-woo's choices have turned him into, what he's like done to justify who he is, like what he's become. But him and Gi-hun started in like the same place. They come from the same hometown, but Sang-woo and him live their lives differently. And Gi-hun, like, as we come to find out, like, the moment that made his whole backstory and character click for me is the fact that he was involved in, like, strikes and riots to try and get workers better rights. And I was just like, this immediately puts all of this in perspective. Like, his poverty is not just a consequence of, like, incompetence or like a lack of like regard for like, you know, himself and his family. It's because he tried to fight for better conditions for people in his shoes.
Yeah, and like it's not to say he didn't make mistakes, of course, because the gambling addiction is clearly a thing. The fact that he like cancelled his mum's health insurance, which has horrific consequences. And the thing is, like, when a character makes a bad decision in in this show, they are punished for it.
Oh yeah.
Like the him returning home after all this to find that his mom has clearly like slipped into a diabetic coma and died without him there, like because he was off playing the game.
Yeah.
You know, in effect, other than like helping out Sebyuk's brother and like Sang-woo's mother, effectively made the money he was earning useless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also his ex-wife and her new family have fucked off to America.
Yeah.
And he wasn't able to stop them. Because the other reason that he wanted the money was so that he could fight for custody of his child.
So in a way, kind of his initial reason for wanting the money, one of the first decisions in his life that kind of parallels who Sang-woo just holistically is as the sum total of his decisions.
Yeah.
Oh my god, this show has like incredibly deep characterization because like we haven't even gotten to really deep into like Saebyuk or like Doksu or Minyo, who is an incredible character.
I love Minyo. I love Minyo.
I think my favorite side character in the show, because she's never really part of she's the hero of her own story, kind of.
She's the comfortable dog of this
comfortable,
show.
Yeah, for real.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. I want to say real quick. Let's get a little bit spicy. I feel like whether or not you can appreciate Minyo as a character, if you can, you're probably a cool dude, and if not, you're probably a prick.
Yeah. I'm imagining that, like, anyone who dislikes Minyo as a character or doesn't get why she's, like, in the show, they might as well tattoo, like, a snake onto them, because they're probably Dokso.
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of people, especially people who aren't very like secure in themselves, the second they see like a female character like weaponize emasculation on a male character, they feel personally attacked.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that bitch, gotta kill her.
Especially if it's somebody like Minyo who is not conventionally attractive.
Yeah, and isn't nice. Like, to be clear. But that's the thing. Like, there is a difference between loving her as a character and liking her as a person.
Yeah.
That's an important thing that a lot of people could benefit from realizing there's a difference between.
Like, she is an absolute scumbag.
Like, because she's a racist. She says some
she's a total... Before we knew what her name was... Before she tells the gang what her name is, Henry and I were calling her Karen.
Yeah.
Because I swear at some point she says, I want to speak to your supervisor, and she's racist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and like,
yeah.
It's one of those things too, like that line that she repeats it a couple times. It's almost like her catchphrase, like I can do anything except for the things that I cannot do. And it's like she's having enough like goofy, stupid fun at the Squid Game that you're kind of like, okay, we need a little bit of levity because everybody's in here because they're having a bad time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think honestly in something like this, a little bit of comedy relief, which I think this show does and balances really well, can mean the world, because it can get a bit, like, Death Game content can get a bit unbearably bleak if there's not a little bit of winking and nodding at the camera. Like, some of the later Saw installments really just are, like, grim torture porn stuff. And again, it's like, the big trinity is, in my mind now, Squid Game, Saw, and Danganronpa, because they're the three Death Game franchises that have become what I can only describe as stupid popular.
Yeah.
It's like they are like, they become not to say that they don't deserve the popularity, but like, holy fuck, that's insane
how
popularity.
Popular they are,
exactly.
Like, and something we'll get into later, I think as well. The real thing that links all three is the eerie similarities between villains. But yeah, it's all these things. Saw of the three of them is the most dour and like self-serious.
Extremely self-serious.
Because the thing is, like, and we'll discuss this more later, but like Jigsaw as a villain is somewhat incoherent and hypocritical in his ideology.
I would say he is utterly incoherent.
I mean, his whole thing is just judging people.
And also, like, well, I didn't kill them. Oh, the trap killed them. Ooh, I didn't do that. Well, you built the trap, asshole.
Yeah, exactly. But, like...
That just makes me think that, like, some of these stories, they are more compelling until the reason is, like, revealed. Because, like, we were talking about, like, the escape room movies, where it's just, like... the motivation behind getting these people into these escape rooms is that they're sole survivors of like incidents, and it's like, oh, can they survive again? Or like in Maze Runner, where it's like, can you get out of the maze so we can manufacture a cure from your like fucking fear responses? It's so like, it's just not grounded in like anything to do with the game, and I'd rather have no explanation than like an extremely dumb explanation.
I think as the show goes on, the explanation for why this is happening is self-evident. Like, I think looking back, a lot of the stuff which they don't provide solid answers on is like the answers are implicitly there. I think a great example is the front man.
Yeah.
The front man is he's a true believer. He has a genuine investment in like the ethics and principles of the game.
He looks like the guy from Sleep Token.
Yes. And when you find out that he is not only Junho's brother, but a previous survivor of the game, you realize, oh, he's a true believer because, like, a lot of, like, victims of trauma, he had to, like, retroactively apply meaning to the suffering he went through.
And it's also sort of like, and this is a theme that, like, comes up a lot in the show. Sang-woo has a moment where he has, like, a full-on breakdown where he's like, if we vote to leave the game now, all of the deaths will be worthless and we will have earned nothing and everything that we've gone through will have been pointless. And it's sort of, I couldn't help but think of, like, that's the kind of logic of people that are like, I had to pay off student loans. Why should my children not have to deal with that? You know, like, why should the generation that comes after me not have to deal with the same traumas that I did? Well, I mean, student loan is a trauma for some people.
well, but it does factor into trauma because, like, think about how people talk about, like, yeah, my parents beat the shit out of me, so why should we ever stop beating the shit out of our kids?
Yeah, it's the same. It is like people have to apply meaning to their trauma, and that leads to sort of the cycle of abuse because they believe that what happened to them has made them a better person somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where to stop the cycle of abuse, you have to first admit that there was no good reason that happened. But that's a really hard thing to do because the one thing that, like, sucks more than suffering is suffering
for no good reason.
Yeah, pointlessly. It's the same reason that, like, if it's like that, like, old torture that they would use on people in, like, prisons in I guess sort of like the 1800s, where it's like they would just make a prisoner turn a big crank that didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And they would just have to turn that crank again and again until it just exhausted and slowly destroyed them. And it's something where it's like, well, if that crank was powering something, people would be like, well, yeah, obviously he's going through some pretty horrific suffering, but, like, a good thing's coming out of it. Where if it's just turning the crank for nothing, people are like, oh, well, that's just sadistic. Sure, he's suffering the exact same as he would if that crank was, you know, turning the rotating cake display in the nuclear power plant cafeteria. But, like, because it isn't doing that, because his suffering is meaningless, it makes it worse. So you have to apply meaning to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you know, Sang-woo is and the frontman are both people who, like, apply the kind of, like, hacky, like, in universe, like, this is not a coherent philosophy, like, social Darwinist take that, like, they're the one, you know, they survived, they're special, therefore they deserve this reward, which, like, you think about it and, like, Sang-woo is just one of many people who were in that room, who were in those, like, 456 players who could have become that guy, like, towards the end, because everyone thought, oh, they're going to be the one who gets the prize money, but they didn't really fully rationalize what that mean is just, like, watching every single other person in the room die at some point in time for some reason. And they can rationalize it as, like, oh, I didn't kill them. The games killed them. Like, I'm just the one who survived till the end because I'm the best. And it's another way that the Squid Game, like, tricks the participants into thinking that they have, like, it's a voluntary process.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think with Sang-woo in particular, much as we were saying earlier, how these themes and, like, characterization and character motivation fuse in really interesting ways, Sang-woo in particular, much like Frontman, has to believe this because he in particular, by the point that he has this rant,
he's killed 3 people.
Has killed 2 people because he kills Se-byuk not long after that. But before that point, he sold out Ali, who fucking trusted him, and he knowingly, like, tricked him and rat-fucked him and got him killed.
Yeah.
And then the glass
maker,
pushed him to his death because he was hesitating.
Yeah.
So he has to believe that it was worth something. And I think even then, him killing himself at the very end was both, obviously he wanted his, like, mum to get the money, but I think also just the fact that he knew if he went back afterwards, he would not only be a man who is still wanted for all these financial crimes, he'd always know in his heart he was a murderer as well, and he didn't want to live to be that kind of person if A, either he wasn't rich, or B, someone else wasn't rich and could repay his mom, because, you know, there's that really interesting parallel between Sang-woo and Gi-hun, because Sang-woo also sold his mum out by obviously putting her, like,
her
business and her
home
as collateral on his futures deals.
Yeah.
He's, like, basically...
And he lies to her.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Everything that Gi-hun did, Sang-woo just does a more white-collar version of it.
Yeah,
because blue-collar gambling is betting on the ponies.
Yeah.
White-collar gambling is betting it all on the stock market. Blue-collar is selling your mum's insurance. White-collar is putting your mum's house as collateral on a big deal.
Yeah.
Like you said, they are parallels. One is more successful than the other, but fundamentally they have the exact same, like, foibles and vices.
Yeah.
But weirdly, the stuff like the stock market, the more white-collar way of doing things is considered more socially acceptable, even though fundamentally the stock market is just a casino.
Yeah, it's just casino for rich people.
And I just want to say, like, as an American and as, like, someone who's, you know, Italian, like, 2 generations from Sicily, I view a lot of media, especially, like, stuff that has to do with, like, class struggle, through a kind of lens of, like, well, how are the immigrant characters being treated in this? And there's also parallels there with Gi-hun. Even though Se-byuk robbed him, he understands that, like, she had reasons to do it and he wants to, like, help her. Meanwhile, Sang-woo screws over Ali. Sang-woo was like, nope, I'm gonna throw the immigrant under the bus because fuck me, I gotta get mine. And whereas Gi-hun's like, this is just another human being, and their life is not any more worthless than mine.
Yeah, and fascinatingly, I think Gi-hun as well, like, that level of humanity throughout is not only in how he treats immigrants, but obviously massively how he treats women, with Sang-woo being an open and brazen misogynist the whole time.
I mean, like, Gi-hun sort of has his... Gi-hun, like, you get the sense in the first episode, he maybe is a little bit of a deadbeat. You know, he's
a loser, definitely.
He's going to the bet on the ponies on his daughter's birthday because he hasn't bought her a present, and he doesn't have any money. And he is stealing his mom's credit card
to gamble with.
But when he gets the money, and he does win big on the ponies before Se-byuk pickpockets him. But when he gets the money, he is really friendly to the teller when he's picking up the money, and he gives her a nice big tip.
Yeah.
Because he's a good person.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And as well, it made me think, I know this is a kind of trite comparison to make just because, you know, they're basically, in the last several years, the two things that are the South Korean exports to get really big in the West. But it made me think a lot about the mother's speech in Parasite.
Yeah.
When she's talking about how she'd be generous if she was rich.
Yeah.
And that, like, being rich gives you the opportunity to be generous. And in a lot of ways, it feels like Squid Game, just by virtue of the fact that it has, 9 hours to discuss this, rather than just over 2, I think it interrogates those feelings a lot more and talks about the nuance. Because, I think what's really interesting as well, this show, I would say, implicitly discusses something really important that gets lost in discourse. Like, people say, like, eat the rich is a catchphrase. We even use it in, like, Less is Morgue and stuff, because Riley is a cannibal and also a socialist. Not cannibal, he's humans, whatever. But,
no, they're cannibal as well. They threaten to eat their parents.
Yeah.
Good point.
Once a week.
But point is, something that a lot of people bring up is that a lot of people who are just kind of, like, trendy leftists, just people who kind of do it to, like, look cool and have, like, social capital or whatever, when they hear, like, eat the rich, they think, okay, we're talking dentists, doctors, actors, and it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, someone who is, I don't know, like a mid-tier banker or a really successful dentist or whatever. Yeah, someone like Sang-woo.
Yeah.
Or fucking Byung-gi, the doctor. They're making money, but they're not they're like wealthy, you know?
Yeah.
Rich, like real rich.
Yeah.
Like the VIPs. That's the rich. The kind
That's who you should be eating.
Well, it's so odd because, you know, in America we have this saying about the 1%, but people online have just expanded the definition of 1% so far beyond the actual, like, shrinkingly small amount of people who command that much wealth, to the point that, like, it's
which is what the 1% want.
Exactly. Yeah, they want this interclass struggle.
People have no concept of, like, the fact is that, under capitalism, you have the people who make, you know, quite a bit of money, a decent amount of money for themselves. A lot of those people make that money because they provide a vital service to the world. People like doctors.
Dentists.
But the really, really rich people, the people that, you know, the Bezoses and stuff, they are the people overwhelmingly who have to create need for the things that they make. Because the things that they are making and making ridiculous amounts of money on are not vital things for human society. The people that are in the VIP room at the Squid Game, those people don't have real jobs.
Well, yeah,
their jobs are like, you know, those like fake buzzword jobs. That's what they do.
Yeah,
well, that's the thing. Like, it's people who are separating, to use another kind of buzz phrase, the workers from the means of production, because it's like, yeah, Jeff Bezos makes all the money for Amazon, but he plays no part in actually actively making or distributing.
He's not even the CEO anymore.
Any of the, well, yeah, that's the thing. It's like at a certain point, you can step back and be the chairman or whatever, which just means coming to sit at a meeting, playing no part in the actual running. But because you were involved at some point along the line, you still get a fat check. And it's no accident that the ultimate villain of this game was a man who works in money lending.
I think a lot of people are trapped in this weird instinct of like, oh, this person is like, looks like they're doing well, or they're bougie. That means they must be rich. But the way culture works is that everybody wants to be bougie or fancy or like Gangnam Style. Like everyone wants to like dress and act like the rich people, like in whatever country they have. As a result of this, it leads to more jealousy, more like, you know, people looking at the commodities that other people have and thinking that that means something, when real wealth is just being able to hire a bunch of workers to build a fucking tunnel system that does nothing and serves no purpose, so that, like, you know, the specific cars of a specific company can drive under a city, instead of putting that money into like infrastructure that would make like public transport better or would make people's lives better.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like the people who have the like stupid amounts of money.
Yeah.
The people who are like stupid rich are the people who invent
Needs.
reasons why you should buy things from them.
I think as well, a perfect example of that dichotomy that Gus is talking about between like the rich and like the very nebulous concept of bougie is, remember like a while back there was a lot of discourse on Twitter where people were saying charcuterie plates.
Oh god, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and it's like someone who had just like bought pretty cheap foods but just plated them nicely, and there was a big debate over like whether it's whether Bernie Sanders has like a second house, or like whether some like fucking
whether AOC can afford to wear a nice dress.
Yeah, like, and it's like all this stuff, and it's like that's the bullshit. But then it's like, okay, but that's one thing. Well, you're arguing about like charcuterie plates. Jeffrey Epstein had a pedophile island.
Yeah.
That he flew to on his pedophile jet
called the Lolita Express.
like there is a difference between someone who likes to buy a nice ham sometimes, and someone who like owns half of a country because owning that property exempts them from tax.
There's a difference between having two cars and Mark Zuckerberg owns a whole island in Hawaii.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
because like being pissed about like middle class people eating like charcuterie plates or like buying lobster from the store because that was a big thing like way back when. That is just one logical leap away from like being like, why are these people considered refugees? They have phones. Like it's this like constant like just feeling of like nobody's actually poor. Like what are you complaining about? I'm poor because I am more in touch with my own suffering than anyone else is because I don't have empathy because I've not allowed like myself to break past the conditioning of a society that wants me to just focus on me and be isolated and alienated.
Yeah, and that is a huge aspect
Of the Squid Game, yeah.
Because everyone wants to be the winner. Everybody wants to be the one remaining.
Yeah, using a selfish ideology as a way to ensure that nothing gets done, which I actually think is a perfect segue to the last game. And I don't mean the Squid Game, I mean the last game. Played between the Game Master and Gihan.
Before we get into that, I wanted to just briefly talk about the other games being children's games. I thought was actually really important because the way the frontman describes this throughout the show is that this is supposed to be an even playing ground, that everybody gets a chance. And I thought that by making a children's game, not only did it do wonders for the aesthetic of the show, it wasn't arbitrary. I think it was supposed to be like anybody who like grew to adulthood would probably have encountered these games because a lot of these games were played by like, in low-income neighborhoods, like by like, all manner of different people. Everybody's going to kind of have some basis on how this game is played. It is kind of even, in a sense. It's another way that the front man and the whole thing makes it think like, oh, you have a shot? Of course you have a shot. Go on and play. It's good. It's fine. Never mind that people are getting off on this.
And to be fair, again, exactly what you said there about why it's those games, that's text as well, which is something that is basically the Game Master's last words.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the bad guy?
Yes!
The true villain of this, Owil Nam, the old man, is such a, like, perfect cookie-cutter representation. Tell you what, I'm gonna ask Gus that you put a screen cap of this on the screen. Because I think I sent you a message a few days before I finished watching it that was like, crazy out on it prediction. The old man's behind it all.
And I didn't say anything. I didn't respond. I ignored that part of your message because I knew if I said anything, and I had already seen it, that it would give it away.
And here's the reason I knew. Because, let me tell you a little bit about the villain of Saw. He is a man named John Kramer. He is a brilliant engineer. But one day, he is diagnosed with a fatal brain tumor and decides, oh, do you know what? Humans aren't really, like, that great. They take what they have for granted. So what I'm going to do is put them through a death game that makes them, like, appreciate life more by bringing them closer to death. And do you know what? To get really close to the action, I'm going to make sure that I'm physically in the room while the death game is happening.
I'm going to pretend to be dead.
Yeah, I'm going to fake my death, be in the room, look like another victim of the game, and then in the end reveal that it was me. And that exactly describes Ilnam in this.
Yeah.
And also, the same thing in Danganronpa with Junko Enoshima, the true villain of it, faking her death early on in the game, and then coming back at the end to reveal it was all her, and she has, like, a big philosophy about, like, how despair is great and hope is shit. And here's a really weird pull. The video game Mad World for the Nintendo Wii is about, like, a televised killing game show.
That is a pull.
And
oh my
the
God.
villain of that turns out to be a person that you save early on, who is, like, the heir to a pharmaceutical company that was using this whole thing to, like, reveal a bioweapon that they made. But he says that most of all, he did it because he wanted to be in there and see the games happening and enjoy the excitement.
God, that's
like,
literally...
Like, it's a trope. It's a trope.
Yeah.
But it's executed, in my opinion, really well here.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say is that obviously he comes back later on, but in the games, that character, the like old man who was gonna like go with Gi-hun the whole way, dies, and he's like the only character who like solely the person responsible for his death, quote unquote, in the game is Gi-hun. And it's the most brutal, the way that they structure the scene is like he's taking advantage of an ill old man to preserve his own life. And when Ilam like calls him on it, you as the audience are like, oh, fuck, I feel like such a scumbag for wanting Gi-hun to win in this. And Gi-hun feels like a piece of shit too, because it's the most like, he's really, he like, that is the one of the few times that he really just like embraces his survival instinct and lets someone die on his watch. The only other debatable one would be the tug of war game, which I'm going to talk about in my other video on the show. And also, he was part of a team in that. But this was like someone's death was completely on his hand, and it's the only person he kills, kills throughout the whole show directly. So it's haunting and it's important.
Yeah, no, I think honestly, in a lot of the other cases, especially in cases where a character fakes their death, like Jigsaw or Junker, a lot of J's, but in cases where they fake their death, it's normally just to remove themselves from suspicion.
Yeah.
But in this case, this is something I want to address
He
real
earnestly
quick.
wanted to play the Squid Game.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is something I want to address really quickly because I think just so we don't get any comments about this and so people are like engaging with what we say after this in its own terms, I want to throw some water on what I think is a really dumb criticism.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people have, like, I saw some people saying things like, oh, how come he, like, let himself be a part of the tug-of-war thing? He could have easily died in that. Or saying, like, oh, how come he decided to, like, arbitrarily take himself out of the game? And the people point those out as though they're plot holes, and they're really stupid, and let me explain why. Number one, the, like, tug-of-war thing, I saw some people in, like, the comments of some things trying to defend this by saying, no, clearly the chains around his arms were looser than everyone else's. And like, no, that's dumb. That's also
true.
really dumb because nothing's more frustrating than seeing a point you agree with argued badly.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, he didn't care if he died during the tug of war. That was the fucking point.
He was already dying.
The reason he was in the games is he knew his death was a foregone conclusion. And so he was chill, like, dying in that. He clearly was able to just say that, like, and provide his knowledge to give them a better chance through a mix of, I imagine, A, obviously he played tug of war in his childhood because he says he loved doing that.
Yeah.
But B, because he's clearly observed this game happen in so many prior Squid Games.
Yeah.
He's seen the techniques that win.
Yeah.
But the second reason, the reason he takes himself out of the game there isn't arbitrary. It's because Gi-hun picks him, and because by this point, because Gi-hun has been genuinely, like, kind and supportive to him throughout.
The only
way for him to not let Gi-hun die is to take the fall in that one.
Yeah, it's an act of mercy from the villain. It's not him just being like, Gi-hun really did beat me here. Like,
he was like pretending to be like senile and forget how many marbles he had, because you know that he was pretending because he does say to Gi-hun, is that what you call fair? Lying to an old man like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was fully letting Gi-hun win.
And the guards like knew who he was. It's not like can you imagine the one guard that was there, like, because they frame it in such a way that when Gi-hun walks away and he's going to be executed, you hear the gunshot, but there's something obscuring where Il-nam is standing.
He's inside that little house.
But here's the thing. Could you imagine being the fucking triangle mask fucking grunt who shoots like the like one of the VIPs like in the game? Because technically that's what they're supposed to do. Like, no, that's something you pretend to do and then talk to your superiors about a bigger decision. You don't just be like, yeah, Triangle Man says this is how it goes. You know who this motherfucker is. You wouldn't do that. That's so
You're not
fucking
gonna blow
stupid.
your boss away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like these low empathy motherfuckers who don't see a face on the triangle people think they're not people. They're just obstacles. I'm just saying.
And as well, like, I hate that we've had to go so deep into weird plot points, but it is an important precursor to the thematic discussion, just so that we don't get a bunch of fucking brain lords using these talking points in the comments, because there were plenty of moments foreshadowing it. One that I think I really picked up on was in the big, like, in the big riot fight scene. The game actually ends when he calls for everyone to stop fighting. Like, they zoom in on him in the control room and then send everyone in.
Yeah. And also the fact that, like, even as far back as the red light, green light, he gets what's going on.
Yeah.
He's like immediately, you wouldn't expect, like, this decrepit old man who's, got a brain tumor to be, like, able to pick up on things as fast as he does. But it's because he's seen all of it before.
Yeah. And he's so giddy.
He's not, like, surprised at all by anything. And you think, like, oh, he's an old man, he's senile, he doesn't know what's going on. No, it's because he's jaded to it.
Yeah, and it's not a coincidence when each time he says, oh, this is a game from my childhood. It's like, yeah, that's why he picked them.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to recreate the innocent joy he had when he was a child playing these games.
But because he's, like, so rich. Because he's so rich and jaded, the only way that he can truly recapture the magic is if he kills people while he's doing it.
Well, yeah, it's basically the only way to create that feeling of the blood pumping that was in those games is to give them the life or death stakes.
And again, that's part of the text. And you gotta wonder whether or not, like, I always think, like, when people are like this about some kind of twist, I feel like they knee-jerk hate the twist, and then they reverse engineer the evidence for them not liking it. Like, to make it bad writing.
Yeah.
Even though, demonstrably, no, it's just that you were a little bit surprised, or you, like, didn't want that to happen, or you just don't like twists, and you wanted to feel smart, so you just, in your, like, Dunning-Kruger way of receiving the information of the show, just decide, yeah, that looks close enough to what I think would make this a plot hole, so I'm just gonna decide that is what happened, without thinking critically about why the actual things that did happen in the show happened.
Exactly, and the very last thing I want to throw water on before we get back into the thematic discussion is some people have said things like the best episode that a lot of people have said, Gambu, which is the one where they played the marble game, which is a phenomenal episode.
It's so good.
Like, tugs the heartstrings, it's tense as fuck, has you screaming at the screen. A lot of people said, oh, the reveal of who he really is cheapens the conversations between him and Gi-hun. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It's like, what you're doing there is you are confusing the sense of betrayal that you are meant to feel there with just the bad feelings.
Because it doesn't cheapen at all, because Gi-hun still thought Il-nam was dead.
And in
He genuinely thought that.
And in Il-nam's mind, he was making a sincere connection there.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know that these motherfuckers, if there was no twist with Il-nam, if he was not the final villain, and he had just died there, and they still arbitrarily wanted to dislike Squid Game, they'd call his death emotional manipulation. You know these fuckers would.
It's almost, wow, I hate when people are like, oh, that's emotional manipulation. Yeah, that's because that's what fiction does.
Yeah, that's what art is.
It's not real, but it makes you feel a feeling, and that's just what happens when you consume a story.
Nobody makes me cry my own tears.
Nobody makes me feel my own feelings.
That's like learning a new math problem and being like, this is intellectual manipulation, or eating food and being like, this is like taste manipulation. Like, yeah. That's what it's made of. That's what its purpose is.
This two and this two are leading me to 4.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm disturbed by this.
I'm literally being gaslit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like, it's...
You don't just plop down a 2 in front of me and then another 2 in front of me and make 4 without my permission.
Yeah. But, like, yeah, so all that out of the way, if you had been told by someone else, like, any of those things that we just deconstructed, this is why you should feel a certain way, we're not saying, hey, feel the way we feel. We're saying, watch it again, or watch it for the first time if you're the particular kind of weirdo who goes and watches a shitload of stuff on a thing they haven't
never
watched.
Seen, yeah.
But form your own opinions, is what we're saying.
Can I talk about a character that I think is a cool character in the show?
Absolutely.
Or a character that I really enjoyed. The character of Ji-yoon.
Yeah.
Who is she joins as part of the tug-of-war team, I think?
Yeah,
yes.
She does.
Because old guy, I'm gonna call him old guy because they reveal his actual name seconds before he fakes his death. For the rest of the show, he is just old man.
Yeah.
Or 001.
Or 001. Yeah. And I was just sitting there going like, yes, old guy, the entire show. But anyway, so old guy has been giving them like strat tips on how to win at the tug of war. And so they need 5 more people for the tug of war team. So they all have to go out and find somebody. And Sang-woo, prick that he is like, go out and find us some strong men. Se-byuk goes over to this girl with, like, a kind of, like, Joan Jett haircut and a nose ring, who's just sitting by herself on the stairs, and it's just like, hey, you want to be on our team? And the girl's just like, cool, yeah. And, this is Ji-yoon. She's kind of like the Daria of this show. She's very, like, whatever, like, she's very, like, deadpan, kind of, like, I don't know how old she's supposed to be, but she's teenager coded.
Yeah.
She feels about 18 or 19 years old. She makes this kind of connection with Se-byuk because Se-byuk is another great character because she's very like ruthless. She's from North Korea, so she's a refugee. She's seen it all. She is like tough and jaded, and she doesn't accept help from people, and she's doing it all for her little brother. So she and Ji-yoon kind of get along immediately because they're both like these sort of weary, surly young adult women. There's another guy that's on the team who is like constantly like praying and quoting Bible verses, and Ji-yoon hates him. She's constantly like, stop praying to God. If you want to thank anybody for why we won this tug of war, thank the old guy because he had the strategy, and thank Sang-woo for being our team leader. Don't thank God, he didn't have any part in this. And we're all sinners and we're all going to hell anyway. And you find out that Ji-yoon's father was a priest who sexually abused her and killed her mother in front of her. And so you find out that that's why she hates this religious guy so much. And she killed her father and went to jail. And she said when she on the day that she got out of prison, she had one visitor waiting for her, and it was the Patrick Bateman looking guy who comes up to people in the subway with the envelopes, and hands out the Squid Game card, and she ends up like she and Se-byuk have this long conversation about like what they're gonna do if they win the money, and like where their dream vacation is, and how like, oh, if we both made it out alive, we'd split the money and we could have a girls' night, we could make mojitos and watch all these movies that because Se-byuk isn't from South Korea, she's from North Korea, she doesn't get the movie references that Ji-yoon makes, so she's like, oh, I'm gonna get you to watch all these classic these classic movies with me. And when they say each other's names, Ji-yoon Se-byuk says, well, what's your family name, Ji-yoon? And Ji-yoon goes, oh, I don't have one anymore, I'm just Ji-yoon. So she's just like completely renounced her parents. Yeah. But the interesting thing about her is that she loses the game on purpose because she realizes that like, as like somebody who spent like all of her teenage years in prison, she has no prospects.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting the way that the Squid Game, like, preys on everybody who's vulnerable in society.
That's the thing. I think down to even the most minor of characters in this show, like even people who have like just one line or participate in one game, like they really brought out the humanity in just about everyone. The characterization that like some of them get, you can then project that onto people who, because of the limits of fiction, need to just be people who you only know as people who get shot in the head. Like that. So it all kind of comes together back to that final game.
Yeah.
That I think should be the final thing we discuss before we wrap
which,
this up.
for context, is ultimately the moments where the philosophies of Ilnam, Evil Old Guy, and Gihun finally come face to face. This idea of, are people fundamentally selfish or compassionate?
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of these things come down to in death games. Because as I mentioned earlier, in Danganronpa, it's all about, like, is hope or despair stronger? In Saw, well, it's not really anything in Saw.
Yeah.
Those movies just sort of became an excuse for violence.
Yeah.
But in Squid Game,
let's just kill women really horribly.
Yeah. In Squid Game, though, it really comes to this point where fundamentally, it's asking, are people like I think Ilnam believes humans are fundamentally a lot more like Sang-woo or Doksu, people who are just like, it's Joker philosophy, basically, from The Dark Knight, the whole like when the chips are down, people will eat each other.
Yeah.
And he illustrates this by saying the last game and pointing out the window to like a homeless man who is like drunk and laying down in the snow, and says like, hey,
he's gonna freeze to death.
Yeah, like he's gonna freeze to death unless someone helps him. What do you bet that like no one does? We'll give it until midnight and we'll see who wins. And in a way, that kind of felt like, I guess what the whole thing is, not that like whether people are like evil, but whether they are just utterly self-interested. Because, like you said earlier, Gus, the way the Squid Games are constructed, you cannot be the last man standing without shafting someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the fact that the Squid Game itself is, well, the way that the last game, which is a Squid Game, they give the participants knives when it's down to the thing. Like, it is so clear that it's supposed to be just two people, and it's supposed to be one person killing another on this, like, very iconic squid-shaped game platform. And effectively, the two people who arrive at that place must be people with, like, pretty much the same experience with the games. People who had to survive through one means or another. Gi-hun and Sang-woo, in a way, because we've been talking about them being parallel characters, that battle between them isn't really a battle for the like philosophy of the game versus that of the player, the same way like Ilnam and Gi-hun's battle with this last game with this homeless man is, because to defeat Sang-woo or Gi-hun is one killing the other's traits in themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Either Sang-woo would, I guess, entirely renounce the humanity that his relationship with Gi-hun had, like, come to represent. Or, in Gi-hun's case, proving in the end that, like, even after everything, he would rather forfeit the money than, actually kill someone, even after they've done all this. And I think, in a sense, that perfectly sets up the final game, because
there's a lingering question because of Gi-hun's decision, because Sang-woo killed himself and Gi-hun still got the prize money.
Yeah.
This game interrogates whether or not Gi-hun is owed that easy out.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially, like, because that end, to a degree, kind of proved Ilnam's, like, philosophy about humanity wrong. Because it was two people who, at the end of the day, both made altruistic decisions. Gi-hun was willing to give up the money not to kill, and Sang-woo was literally willing to sacrifice his own life so that Gi-hun didn't walk away empty-handed.
Or could just live in general.
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, it was two people who both made unselfish decisions, which I think is why, in the end, Ilnam reached out to Gi-hun again a year later when he knew that he was kind of finally on death's door. Because obviously he invites Gi-hun back, comes, sees that he's on life support, like, will probably be dead within the hours, as we find out. Because I think, much like the frontman, Ilnam had to believe that ultimately his philosophy was right, or he would die a monster.
Yeah. And it's whether or not he does die believing what he believes is sort of left up to the viewer, because he flatlines pretty much at the exact same moment that woman comes back with the cops to take the homeless man
care or something.
Care or to a hospital or something.
And that's a great moment, because like the one...
And Gi-hun is like, I hope you died. I hope you died seeing that you were wrong. But we don't know if he died seeing that he was wrong.
But I guess at the end of the day, the point is that, like... And I think this show is great. It denies people those neat answers because, like, in this case, a moral victory isn't a victory.
No.
Because whether that guy died knowing or not knowing, it won't bring any of the 455 people who were killed back. It won't bring Gi-hun's mother back. It won't stop subsequent games or end the systems that made people desperate enough. Like, what I love is the fact that in that, while the ending, yes, very sequel hooky, that the red hair is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
I admit, I think it probably could have ended, like, this is just me writing fanfic here.
Yeah.
But if you were to say to me, Henry, where would you end this? I would end it at the exact moment that Gi-hun sees the salesman playing the game with someone across the tracks. End it there. Like, that's the perfect moment of, like... But again, the real irony is the ending that is there. Because the monkey in us is like, please, go and defeat all the bad guys. Go and defeat all the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like, we want to see that because we want satisfaction. But it's that same conversation from Battle Royale, which incidentally, the creator listed as one of the influences, along with things like Koji Ultimate Survivor, where they say a lot of times, like, rebellious art is just a way of, like, pacifying the masses by making them feel like they've rebelled vicariously. And I'll admit, it would have been the same thing if, like, say, like, Junho appeared again, sopping wet in the last minute with a machine gun and gunned down all the VIPs.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the Squid Game is just a metaphor for...
capitalism.
Well, yeah, it's just a metaphor for the meat grinder, the desperation that these different systems force people into.
Yeah.
Like, it's the equivalent of, like, MatPat talking about, more shimmer things coming down. Like, that's just a stupid way to look at it, because the shimmer is a metaphor for self-destruction, and a Squid Game is the metaphor for, like, the degradation and violence and even death that people are forced into by desperation and poverty.
I should say it's pretty much foregone at this point that we're going to get a second season of this, and honestly, I don't mind that we're getting more Squid Game, because, like...
I'm curious to see.
Look, here's the thing. At the end of the day, if it's as entertaining as the first one, that means regardless of whether or not it's, like, causing a net amount of basedness to fill the population, it still is an entertaining show regardless. Like,
it's
this
base boosting the population, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, this doesn't need to be the like the vanguard of, like, the revolution, the thing that makes us all, like, achieve class consciousness or whatever. At the end of the day, it is a product, it is an entertaining show, and I don't demand from all of my media that it's doing like a good to the world just by it existing. But it does give you some interesting ideas to chew on.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I mean before I got onto the thing about the ending was though that like it's nice that it shows at the end of the day like there isn't like a final boss to this thing. While this guy who we thought was sweet and innocent organized the games, he's not ultimately like it's not the fucking like Game of Thrones. You kill the Night's King and his army turns to dust type bullshit.
Yeah. No, and that's what I was going to say is that regardless if we even see Gi-hun in the next Squid Game season, the battle between the ideologies of Gi-hun and Ilnam came to a definitive end. Because honestly, whether or not Ilnam saw that that man got help, the second that he had that lingering question and called Gi-hun back into the room was the moment that he admitted that he might be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that that kind of says it all. That, like, he made this legitimate connection with a legitimate gangbu during these games that, like, were from his childhood. And because of that, he saw Gi-hun as an equal, and it kind of highlights how fucked up this is, which is why he needed to prove to Gi-hun that his philosophy was right. And maybe because he thought he had won, that was the thing that finally put that monstrous old man to bed, because he was like, well, whether or not I find out, like, if he did find out, Gi-hun wins against him, like, in a sense that this guy knows he lost, but if he dies without seeing that, he's beaten Gi-hun. So I think he honestly died happy in that moment, like, to try and just be like, yeah, I invited you here to prove you wrong. He thought he won, but in truth he didn't, but he could die pretending he did in delusion, which is the whole reason he created this whole process in the first place.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the victory, in a sense, comes from the fact that he literally in the text admits he and all of the other people running the game are like utterly empty.
Yeah.
Inside, like they are people who are so numb that they need to go to these like absurd. Because the thing is, it's not like they're just going out into the streets murdering people. Like the absurd amount of resources and planning and everything that goes into this elaborate thing they do, and the fact that it takes that to give them any sense of joy in life is so telling as to the complete emptiness of these people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it reminds me a little bit of, in a way, the Harga from Midsommar and how they're framed as it, like, the ending of Midsommar tonally is if Squid Game ended with Gi-hun getting the money and then solving his own problems. Like that.
Yeah,
that's
you're right.
That same feeling of just like, well, these people are evil, but the evil they generate provides opportunities for emotional catharsis. And I like that Gi-hun doesn't get that emotional catharsis, even though he technically won the game, because the fact that he was even playing means that he was still under Ilnam's power, and the fact that Ilnam didn't see the end of the game means that the game is working as intended. So, honestly, there's a lot of thematic meat to chew on. I would watch another season of this, and, like, I think it could be good. And even if it isn't, whatever. There's one good season of Squid Game that fucking is awesome.
Yeah, you're completely right there, and I think that central metaphor that you just uncovered is such a great one, because at the end of the day, like, that whole thing is such a great parallel to, like, what people say about capitalism. About, like, yeah, sure, like, some people get, like, crushed under the boot, but, like, we wouldn't have iPhones without that. And don't you tweet from iPhones?
Yeah.
Like it's that same thing of like, hey, look, it's bad, but some people get some pretty good things out of it, including you. But, like, yeah, I think ultimately there isn't any point being cynical about it, because after this, I have a lot of faith in Hwang Dong-hyuk.
Yeah.
Like,
is this the first thing that he's made?
I think it's... I don't know exactly, but it's his breakout thing, because...
I'd be shocked if this was his first... I'd be shocked if this was his first, like, venture. into
Well, the
creating
thing is,
something.
he did like the first drafts of it back in 2009, but between then, and this is another classic thing that kind of proves the point of the series, because this is presented as a really inspirational story when it's a super depressing one. But between him first writing it and him actually selling it, he got so desperate that he had to sell his laptop to get by.
Wow.
In between that, before they finally picked it up, and people like said like, oh, that's a really inspirational story that he persevered.
No.
And it's like, no, it's fucked up that like it was the same thing in 2009 as it was now, and it was just as true back then in the aftermath of the financial collapse. Is just that the fucking capricious industry fucked him.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. The reason that Squid Game is so big now and that it got picked up now too is that everyone is more aware of how shitty this stuff is. Like how shitty the world is.
Yeah, because COVID made it impossible to hide from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, all of this could be read as inspirational, or just that like because the issues with our society can no longer be ignored, corporations now must shine a light on it. The industry itself must be like, well, we need to have something a little bit closer to like what we're actually dealing with here.
Or they're gonna kill us.
Hey, at the end of the day, the fact that they're selling this as a product means that, you know, they can't do it exactly this way. They can't do a Squid Game exactly this way because we'd know what they were doing. You know,
Yeah.
when they
Yes,
finally
exactly.
that's why there needs to be more death game media, because if they make all the different death games in media, we'll be able to be so genre savvy that when the rich people finally put us in a death game, we'll know all the solutions. And that's what I think. Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what the
If a
takeaway
weird guy on a subway
is.
comes to you with a card, you'd be like, no! I'm not playing your
No,
game. I'm not letting you
motherfucker.
slap me.
I'm not gonna throw the envelope at the other envelope.
You know
You
he has
slap
money
me,
on
I
him, so
slap
you just
you.
mug him.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was Squid Game. Any final thoughts, Henry, Meg?
Did we say at all that like Minyo gets the best kill in the
Yes!
She
Oh
fucking
my
yeah,
god!
gets the
yes,
best
she
kill in the
fucking
whole
does.
show.
Oh man.
No, that was fucking dope.
If you made it this far into the video, leave another like off-color, like, you know, comment on the Dire Gentleman channel about what item you would compare the size of Dokso's dick to. Pick a comically small
Yeah,
item.
how tiny is
and,
Dokso's
How
dick?
tiny is Dokso's dick?
I think that about nailed it. Thank you guys for discussing this wonderful show with me, and for all of you who are watching, we will see you in the next Squid Game.